Hey, what's up, guys? So in this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about sort of the design features, I guess, of Saga, um, what my goal was for the game, kind of how the cards function, things like that. And I'll try to keep this as short as I possibly can. So Saga is basically a loot-based dungeon exploring experience that is an add-on to the game of Flesh and Blood. Um, So it takes a team of 1 to 4 allied heroes through a kind of like a dungeon map experience, and it puts them against multiple enemy encounters um, through a gear progression sort of experience. And I'm using some of the same words twice here. But there will be looting cards and have the option to add those cards to their gear setups, their decks, if they're, regular cards from the game that aren't equipment or weapons, etc. It kind of facilitates gear progression as something like D3 would when you have a starting character and you go all the way through the game and you get powerful cards and legendaries and stuff like that. And so I'm going to talk about each facet of the different, I guess saved objects here or parts of the game. So all of the hero decks support the 8 current hero classes. Now with Monarch impending, we have some new heroes and some talents and things like that, which the game will support as well. It'll actually get pretty interesting. But these are the 8 hero classes, and so right now I have setups of Dorinthia and Warrior, so 2 of the heroes. And the hero deck construction has some specific requirements. So you can have any number of weapons, but they must be rare or lesser quality. The specific hero card that you have doesn't really matter in terms of life, because life is based on the number of players in the campaign. And then only 8 equipment pieces, and 1 of them can be class specific, but they must all be common cards, so nothing of higher quality than common. They can be generic stuff that isn't Iron Rot or Null Rune if you would like. These starting decks just have an Iron Rot set and a Null Rune set, minus the slot that the class specific would take in that specific set, right? So instead of Iron Rot Helm, we have Helm of Vison's Peak for Guardian. In the Wizard deck, instead of the Null Rune Robe, we have the Robe of Rapture, right? So that Arcane Barrier replaces the Null Rune for that class specific equipment. And then the actual deck has to be, I know I have 21 cards here because I was playing a game before this, but it'll be 20 cards for the starting deck. Let's take out the Mangle that I got here as a prize card earlier. So it'll be a 20 card starting deck, and it must contain only blue pitch value, so 3 resource pitch. You can have up to 4 rares, but only single copies of those rares. And the rest of your deck will be commons, and you can have up to 2 copies of those commons. So all of the decks that I have constructed for the game have 16 commons, 4 rares, and only 1 copy of each rare. And most commons have 2 copies, though some only have 1, depending on what the card is. And that's just the requirement. So I have all of these set already as saved objects for the game. So whenever you go to play, you can already pick your saved object for your heroes here, right? If we want to play Brute, Ranger, whatever. And it's already basically set to these requirements. If you'd like to construct your own at some point, you just have to follow those requirements of what I laid out, which will be in the rules document as well. For the loot deck, this is the deck of cards that you will be looting from as you go through the campaign. And it'll also be the deck of cards that the enemy heroes draw from to play their decks. So enemy heroes aren't restricted by class-specific cards. They can play any card in the game, which I'm sure at first sounds powerful, but there's a double-edged sword to that, is that some classes benefit from having those class-specific cards, right? So let's think of Mechanologist that uses Boost as an ability. It's going to be very hard for enemy decks to activate Boost when their decks are random, drawing card pools from the 8 classes here, plus generics. So you're rarely ever going to be able to activate something like Boost, right? So some cards are great, some cards are pretty not great. Like Ranger cards, of course, too. I still need a bow to fire Ranger arrows, and so most of the time those cards are just going to be used for pitching or defense. So there is some, kind of ebb and flow there for that. But the loot decks are a singleton decks, so kind of think of it as like a cube in a sense. There are 25 cards per hero class, so that's 200 hero-specific cards. And then there are something like 120 generics, and then the fables and stuff. But the one exception I have is that there are 4 copies of Organian Tome to support that card's playability a little bit more. And there are 4 copies of Lunging Press, which I know it sounds kind of weird, but support in this game is actually a pretty decent archetype. Is that any hero can play it as a support hero, but things like that support, like Lunging Press, that gives attack action cards +1 damage, are pretty fun within this game, as you're going to want in multiplayer classes that help support other heroes for damage. So that's just how I have this set. You can honestly do whatever you want with it, but the singleton card factor is pretty cool, as once you encounter something like Enlightened Strike, there's never going to be an Enlightened Strike ever else in the loot deck. And so once you have an enemy you play with, defeat an enemy that has Enlightened Strike, if you want to choose that as your prize card, you get to have that 1 copy of Enlightened Strike. It kind of functions like a cube draft. So if you've ever played, like Magic the Gathering, the 25 cards per hero are like the most powerful cards for those heroes typically, considering that all the heroes start with blue pitch value resources, you're basically going to be drawing upgrades pretty much the whole time. The exception for that is that generic cards do contain their blue pitch value card in here, just because not all heroes start with the generic cards. There's only a few that have like 1 or 2 per deck, I think. All the class specific stuff, doesn't have the blue pitch value, except for like a few exceptions, right? I think Flick Flack Ninja starts with blue Flick Flack, but also another copy exists in the deck. And I just wanted to give some extra support for some of those cards that are a bit more powerful that you wouldn't mind having a second copy of as a rare. But everything is pretty much yellow or red if it's class specific. So damage and card power will increase as you go through the loot deck and add cards to your deck or swap cards out for your deck. So the balance you want to strike is you already have the maximum resource efficiency. How do you up the damage potential of your decks? So that's basically how the loot cards are constructed. And like I said, if there's cards you play through here that you don't like, Rusted Relic is one of those cards that's not a great card. It's a decent cube type draft card because anybody can play it. But I don't find myself playing it a lot. So if you're like, hey, I don't want this, just delete it from the loot deck and save it. You can go up or down in your card pools however you want. It's really up to your discretion, but I find that this one works pretty well for the game. So let's talk about the tokens. So we're going to get now into some of the custom created stuff that I have for Saga. I'll pull out the Saga deck here last to talk about that, but tokens are, I have some custom created tokens that add some depth to the game. So the way Saga plays out is that you're playing, multiple enemy encounters and stuff over the course of one game, right? So I think in Path of Fortune, this first campaign I'm releasing, I think there's like 9 enemy encounters that you'll have. And so life that you have doesn't reset at the beginning of each encounter, right? So if I'm playing a 2-player game where I have 80 life divided by 2 to 40 life, I don't get 40 life back if I go through like 5 to 10 of that life per an encounter. That's if I lose 5 life in the first encounter, then that's all the life that I have left for the rest of the game, unless I find cards that give me life. So life is definitely very valuable resource that you're going to want to preserve. And I want to design tokens that may give you a little bit added benefit as you're playing through the game. This is one of them. And these tokens you'll get from different Saga cards, There's not a whole lot of instances in this specific saga because I didn't want to up the complexity too much for players that are getting accustomed to the game, that are interested in it, or this variant of the game. So, you know, for example, Sword of Wraith is one of them that you can gain. And these kind of function the same way that regular tokens in the game do, just kind of add some depth to, you know, things that don't really already exist in the game. So Sword of Wraith, you know, action destroy Sword of Wraith. Next time you would deal damage this turn, that damage is increased by 1. Go again. So that'll benefit any class. That'll just buff their next damage dealing attack or whatever by 1. You can have multiple of these that stack, kind of like Rune Chants would. Another one for defensive ability is Shield of Wraith. So this function has an instant ability to destroy it, and the next time you be dealt damage, prevent 1 damage that source would deal. So it kind of functions close to the new Illusionist ability. I made this before I knew that was even a thing, and so it's similar but a little bit different. And you're not going to encounter these tokens very often, so they are powerful in the sense that you can use them whenever, and they don't you don't lose them throughout encounters. So if you find a Shield of Wraith, you get to keep that until you get rid of it. It's not something that resets. And then, so Spirit of Wraith, we have here is that destroy it and you add 1 resource, go again. I think I did talk about one of the videos, but if I hadn't mentioned it here, one of the caveats to designing this game is that I don't have card frames for Flesh and Blood with Magic Set Editor, which is what I use to design the cards. So I'm using Magic card frames that already exist. And of course, I can't use Flesh and Blood symbols within Magic card frames. So I've used the mana symbols that kind of correlate. So, the red mountain is the red pitch. Green forest would be life. They look similar enough to where I think players will understand what that connection is, and of course I'll reiterate that through different asset functions, whatever facets of the game. And so those are just some of the tokens. There's a couple things in here that are specific to Monarch that aren't applicable yet until Monarch releases. And so I'm excited to add that aspect of the game, but I won't quite reveal that yet. But I'm sure anyone that downloads this and takes a look at it will kind of understand what I'm gonna have in the game added. So anyway, so those are just some of the tokens, and like I said, the difference with these tokens is that if you played a game with Runeblade and you got runes, rune chant tokens, and you ended the game and you still had a couple left, those go away. These tokens don't go away. They are permanent tokens until you get rid of them. And so that's just one extra thing, just to keep in mind with these tokens that like I said, I'll reiterate in the rules post and stuff like that, just so players don't forget that, hey, I got this sort of Wraith token, you don't have to feel pressure to use it during your next, you could save it all the way to the final boss fight. And then the last custom aspect of the game are the enemy heroes. And so enemy heroes are newly designed enemies that you will encounter throughout the course of the campaign. And there are different tiers of them, and that will be specified by the saga cards that you encounter. So as you go through the saga, I guess I didn't talk about the saga yet. As you go through the saga, you'll encounter different types of enemy heroes. So earlier on, you'll type regular enemy heroes that aren't very powerful. As you go through it, you'll find more and more stronger enemy heroes. And so, for example, one of your, initial enemy heroes that you may encounter would be the Guardian here. So I'll talk about how the card frame looks. And so this is the Guardian. So that's his name at the top, his artwork. And the second caveat that I didn't really explain in the video yet is that all the artwork is sourced. So I'm just one person working on this in my spare time. Something I wanted to do with friends. Never really intended to kind of release this publicly, but I had a little bit of interest on Reddit, so figured, hey, why not? Let's share it with others that might find it enjoyable. And I do credit all the artists, but you might run into cards that you might see artwork from something else. I kind of grab what was relevant, I thought, to the card. And there's only so many choices when I'm searching for a card that I want to say the Guardian, that feel like really reflect the artwork, that makes sense with the card. So you might find some overlap there, but that's kind of the story on that. So anyway, underneath your art is your enemy type. So if you encounter a Saga card that says face an enemy hero, you're going to randomize an enemy hero from this 9-card deck. And then the enemy hero's ability, so Arcane Barrier X, which I do explain in the first enemy that you encounter in the Saga. But that just is how it sounds. You can pitch any amount of resource to prevent any amount of arcane damage. And then the bottom 2 numbers there are going to be your deck size for the enemy, and then the prize cards that the allied players would draw, or the number of them if they defeat this enemy hero. So he starts with a 10-card deck, and then he gets, or you get 1 prize card for player on the allied team that defeats him, right? So if both Bravo and Dorinthia here on a team defeated him, Bravo would get a prize card, Dorinthia would get a prize card, and that comes from his deck. So his 10-card deck, he'll get that prize card. And so deck progression it has 2 different ways to progress, right? So you're going to have Saga cards that you're going to loot cards from the loot deck. The whole team will loot them, right? So you'll say, like, loot 4 cards. The whole team will loot the 4 cards and then can disperse them however they want amongst themselves. They're on a team, so, I mean, if there are 2 cards for the Dorinthia, great. Might be 1 card for Bravo, it might be 1 card that's a Ranger card nobody can use until you want to get rid of it. You might have all 4 cards from Bravo. It just kind of depends, because you're going to want to increase the total power level of your team. Or, as you defeat enemies, you'll get to pick a card out of a much larger card pool. And so that's going to help with, like, a bit more targeted deck progression, right? So a lot of times you're going to loot cards from this deck that aren't going to be class specific to you at all. They're not going to help you out. Or you might end up lucky and get a powerful card that you didn't even have to work for. But then you also have cards that you're going to have to defeat the enemies for to target. So you'll get a specified card out of a larger card pool that might help you out a bit. But of course, you know, it's going to require more effort to get those cards. So progression is pretty well balanced in terms of RNG versus targeted progression, or loot drops, I guess, if you want to call it that. And then on the bottom, so obviously Magic card frames don't have a slot on the bottom left of the card, except for Vanguard cards, if I remember right, but I just don't like the way they look. I really like the format here of the map treasure cards, whatever they're called, from Ixalan. So the number on the right is his health, and the number on the left is intellect. So he has 7 starting health, and he has 3 intellect. And so that's just consistent throughout all the enemy hero cards. And so whenever enemy heroes spawn, minus the very first one you encounter in the Saga that says otherwise, you'll get a random weapon that they'll also spawn with. If you randomize the hero deck, right, let's just say I face an enemy hero from a Saga card, right, I randomize it, I flip, I'm going to encounter the Wraith, and then his weapon is going to be Death Dealer, right? So he gets to shoot arrow cards, but the downside is that he doesn't have a weapon to actually attack with unless he has arrow cards. If he had a one-handed weapon, he would get that one-handed weapon, and then he would continue to shuffle it until he got another one-handed weapon. So all enemy heroes are always going to start with 1 two-handed or 2 one-handed weapons. And as you progress through the game and face more enemy heroes, they're going to get tougher, right? So let's take a look at the noble heroes. So noble enemy heroes are all the same versions of what exists here, except they're going to be more powerful. So let's see. I'm just going to... All right, so got to the Wraith here. So this is the noble version of the Wraith. And so let's see what's different. And so he'll have a plus next to his name that signifies that he is noble version of it. And then also has the noble enemy hero subtype. But now he has an ability. It says once per turn action, he can pay 1 resource, deal 1 arcane damage to each opposing hero, and then go again. So these are going to start getting more powerful. He gets 5 more cards for his starting deck, but when you defeat him, you get an additional prize card. And then he also gets an additional card, an additional intellect number, or point, rather. For his the amount of cards he would draw up to at the end of the turn. But he still has 4 health. So he's relatively easy to defeat, but he has a little bit more damage potential going for him. And that's a common theme that you'll see with all the nobles. So they'll just be more powerful versions of what already exists and will gain abilities. When we look at rare enemy heroes, that's the next step up from noble common enemies. You're going to see it look a little bit different. So you'll get some more color into the actual cards themselves. So this is the warrior, who's a rare enemy hero. So his ability is whenever the targeted defending hero defends with one or more cards from their hand during a chain link, he gets to create a Sword of Wraith token. So if I attacked with him and the defending hero defended with 2 cards, I get 1 Sword of Wraith token. If I play an additional attack that creates chain link 2 and they defend with a card, I get a Sword of Wraith token. So 1 per, no matter how many cards defended with, per chain link. Then he also has the Arcane Barrier X reminder. I didn't initially include all that in the cards, but I didn't want players to forget that it existed in the game, so I just decided to put that in everything. But now he gets 20 starting cards instead of the 15. Only 1 prize card, because he is a regular rare enemy hero. 4 intellect, but then he has 13 health, so he's a little bit tougher foe. And now we're going to look at the Noble Rare. So let's look at the Noble Rare version of him. And so this is the stronger version of the Warrior. So the Warrior Plus is a Noble Rare enemy hero. So now he has, whenever a defending hero defends with 1 or more card from their hand, create a Sword of Wraith token. So what's the difference here is that before it was whenever the targeted defending hero. And so in Flesh and Blood Saga, in multiplayer campaigns, you can defend for your allied heroes, or play defense reactions for, or attack reactions. But in this instance, you can be a non-targeted defending hero and defend for a hero, but that's going to trigger his effect, right? So if I'm the warrior and I'm attacking Bravo here, and Dorinthia wants to help defend with him because he has a really good sequence that he wants to play out during his turn, he wants to use all 4 cards, while she is not the targeted defending hero, because I'm attacking Bravo, it's going to trigger his ability because she, as a defending a card, designates herself as a defending hero now. So she's not going to take the damage or anything, but she is defending for him. So it's going to trigger his ability. And then Noble Rares and up are going to have the stagger mechanic. And so I think there might be 1 or 2 regular rares that have stagger. Or there might even be 1 noble. I think there's 1 noble that has stagger too. But staggering is a pretty interesting, another one of those double-edged sword mechanics, and I really like putting those kind of risk-reward type things into games. And so staggering is going to take place whenever a allied hero or a defending hero, on the allied team is going to bring this hero down to 9 or less health. So let's say, for example, he's at 13, Bravo comes in for 5 damage and brings him down to 8. The stagger mechanic is going to take place. And so what happens when you stagger an enemy? Whenever the hero that staggers the enemy, so Bravo in this instance, Bravo is going to get to take an additional turn. So normally after Bravo's turn, right, it would go back to the warrior here, and then it would go to Dorinthia, and then back to the warrior, and then back to Bravo. So it's this kind of interchange of turns. The enemy hero is always going to take more turns before all other multiple allied hero teams, right? If it's a one-on-one campaign, then it's just back and forth, but he'll take twice as many turns as the Bravo, right? Because it's only 1 enemy hero here. But Bravo's going to get to take an additional turn now. And so any cards that I had lost defending with, or whatever else with the Warrior Plus then, I am going to have to use that same card pool from my hand to defend his next attack, and he gets to draw and do all that stuff. And so it's a really cool way for allied heroes to give a big attack to try to take down stronger enemies. And the design, I guess, idea I had there was kind of like Dark Souls. If you've ever played Dark Souls, when you get an enemy down to like half health or so, there's points where you can stagger them. And they'll kind of drop to their knees or do what else, and you can do that animated attack, right? If you hit it just right at the right time, and it takes a big chunk of damage and gives you like this additional attack without fear of being attacked. And so that additional turn really wanted to emphasize that. However, usually when you bring an enemy down to that half health point, they get stronger, right? They gain some other ability and do some more powerful stuff. And so if the Warrior Plus is able to survive that additional turn, attack action cards you play cost 1 less for each Sword of Wraith you control. So now if I Sword of Wraith tokens that I get from them defending are going to reduce the cost of my attack action cards. So he's going to get a lot stronger if he still survives that additional turn from Bravo. So it's this really cool risk reward where you get an additional attack in, but, you know, you're going to start facing a tougher hero here if you don't bring them down to 0 life. And he still has the Arcane Barrier X. His starting card pool is going to go up to 25 card deck. You get the 2 additional prize cards because he is a noble. And then his health is 17 and 4 intellect. So he's getting closer to a Blitz hero health. And that's sort of how the progression goes with enemies, is that once you get to like the elite status enough, you're going to start facing as if you're playing like a regular hero. And so let's look at a elite enemy hero. So these ones are definitely very, very strong. So this is the Archbishop of Volrath. You can see the gold within the card here. It signifies kind of the elite colors of him, but he's an elite enemy hero subtext. And whenever a hero plays an action card, create a rune chant token. So their abilities are going to get a lot stronger. And keep in mind, you know, enemies have a lot of downside to them, too, as I have randomized decks with really not much synergy. And so I have to kind of create that synergy through enemy abilities to guarantee that I can get some kind of damage out of it. His stagger is at 10, so whenever you stagger him, action cards you play cost 1 less for each rune chant you control. So if I have a bunch of rune chants from you guys or allied heroes playing action cards the previous turn, right? Let's say Bravo, typically he's only going to play 1, but let's say Dorinthia played a couple, I don't know. And so he has 2 rune chants. His action cards are going to cost 2 less until he attacks and blows them up. And then Arcane Barrier X, he's going to have a 30 card deck, but you get 3 prize cards, but he's going to have 20 health and 4 intellect. So he's basically a Blitz hero with a pretty powerful ability. Yeah, and so the rest of the enemies, there's a few more, right? That's going to be in the Saga deck, right? So your initial enemy hero that you face will be in the Saga deck, and then you've got a couple more of the bosses in there, so that you'll face, and that's part of the Saga deck as it's part of that campaign. So let's take a look at the last piece here, and this is the main piece of the whole game here. This is the Saga deck. And so Saga cards are going to be basically simulating the map experience. So you have to think about, you're going through a dungeon here, right? You're going through this map, but it's in the form of a card deck. I wanted to streamline it, make it as simple as possible. And this first one that I'm releasing is very linear. So the top of the card is the Saga. So this is Volrath's dungeon. This is the campaign. And then it is a Saga card, and this specific one is the entrance. And so Saga card layout, it will have a action at the top here underneath the name, or it'll have 2 subsets of actions. So you're always going to have a movement until you get to the very last Saga card in the deck. And then you might have actions that happen when you encounter the Saga card. So this one doesn't have any special actions. It just says move to hallway number 1. And so the way movement will work is you'll reveal the next card in the Saga deck, and that's going to be titled hallway number 1. So this is all in order to kind of facilitate this already streamlined map experience. You're going to have the art for the Saga card, and then you're going to have the flavor text down at the bottom. And so if you really want to get into the role of this Saga, right, and have this like really flavorful D&D like experience, I wanted to set the tone, and as if you're kind of playing like a game of Dungeons & Dragons or something like that. It's not necessary, right? If you just want to play through the game, you don't have to, but most of us, really, myself, and my friends like that kind of scenery, sort of laying out where we are and stuff. And so while you don't have a whole lot of choice like you could in D&D, where you can just do whatever you want, you're still going to have that scenery set. So flavor text here is up to the DM's discretion if they want to set the tone of the scene. And then once all players are ready to move to the next Saga card in the deck, they will say they're ready, and then we can move. So let's say we're all ready here and we move to hallway number 1. We're going to then flip the top card over. Right, it's already ordered top down. We're going to flip that top card over, and we're going to go to the next card, which is hallway number 1. And so here you'll see the 2 subsets of actions. You'll have a movement action right above the art, but before that, we'll have the actual action of the hallway number 1 here of the Saga card, which is loot 4 cards. So I have reminder text in some of the first cards just to remind players what the actions do. But the allied team draws a total of 4 cards from the loot deck and then distributes them amongst heroes however they would like. So those 4 cards that they draw, let's say it's Bravo and Dorinthia here, If it's class-specific stuff or generics that they want to add to their deck, they can add them. If it's something they want to swap out from their deck, they can definitely swap them out. They just have to maintain that 20-card minimum deck. If it's equipment, right, they can add that equipment. If it's something that they want to keep, but they don't necessarily want to add to their deck, or, you know, they swapped out one of these cards from their starting deck, they'll have a kind of a slot or a zone off to the side here, wherever they want to put it. That'll be the armory, and so that'll just contain all the cards that they're not using, but that they still own. And so cards in their armory, they can add to their decks later, or it'll have extra equipment that they're not using at the time, right? So I'd probably have like a Null Rune Hood or something in here that I'm not using because I'm using Helm and Bison's Peak. Or maybe I had a generic card that's cool, but I don't want to use it quite yet. Or, you know, maybe I even had a card that I thought later on I might want to use, or fits like a different build type that I don't want to use right now. So it could be like Stamp Authority maybe, or Forge for War for Bravo here, something that's a little bit more defensive based, or a different strategy than just you know, swinging in. I might like that card, but maybe I don't want to add it to my deck now because I don't have enough support for it. Anything I don't want to use is just going to go to a discard pile, which if you ever cycle through the loot deck will just be reshuffled. In this campaign you won't. But so that action takes place, and once all of the actions above the movement subtext resolve and all players are ready to move on, then they will move to the next card. And so you would just play the Saga cards all the way down. You'll have things like enemy encounters you'll face. If it's something that's a specific name thing, it's going to be in the next part of the Saga deck, right? So if we're going to hallway number 2 and it says face a servant enemy hero, it'll have that reminder there, begin a game of Flesh and Blood against a servant. So it is the next card in the Saga deck, right here. If it's just face an enemy hero or face a noble rare enemy hero, whatever it is, it's going to be referring to the specific enemy decks here that exist outside the actual Saga deck. It could be things like gaining life, create a sort of Wraith token. You have encounters in here, and that just refers to the next card in the Saga deck, and it should reference that as well. And then you're always going to have your movement. And so it's just a pretty linear top-down. You resolve the top action. Once everyone's ready and it's resolved, you move to the next card in the deck. And that's basically the whole design standpoint of the game. So I know it's quite a bit. I'll answer any questions that I have and probably detail a little bit more things out in the post. But that's Saga in a nutshell. So I hope you guys enjoyed this aspect of it, and I have the how to play and a little bit more of the gameplay in a couple other videos. And let me know what you guys think. So as always, cheers. Catch you guys later.